Hello, this is the second in a series that we are presenting through the Redlands Community Foundation, and in this second series in partnership with the Chamber of Commerce of Redlands. We're delighted with this partnership because it will open up a larger venue for people who are interested in the subject of virtual job searching, strategies, and we hope successful completions. It's our delight and great pleasure that Dr. Kelly Dries is going to be heading up this series. She is the Executive Director of the Office of Career and Professional Development at the University of Redlands, where she oversees the integration of career education across the campus. Some of her greatest strengths lie in helping people who are seeking to utilize various means in order to attain their life goal of a job in the field that they want. And certainly virtual job searching has now become a major part of the landscape. The Redlands Community Foundation is delighted with this outreach because it has been in its first series, which focused on the proper use and abilities to negotiate Zoom for good effectiveness, which was received well. We think that this is going to be an outstanding series. And so enjoy and welcome Dr. Kelly Dries.
Well, thank you for that introduction. Hello, Redlands Chamber of Commerce and community members. I am excited to be here today chatting with you, and let's get started. My name is Dr. Kelly Dries. I am the Executive Director for the Office of Career and Professional Development at the University of Redlands. And I'm thrilled to be talking today about one of my favorite networking tools, LinkedIn. You're all probably familiar with the statement, it's not what you know, it's who you know. I would actually take it a step further and say it's not who you know, it's who knows you. Who can speak to who you are as a person, your brand, your skills and talents, and how can you really leverage LinkedIn to build a network and create a network who does know you and potentially open up opportunities for yourself in the future. Today, I'm going to share with you my top 4 tips for how you can utilize your LinkedIn profile to really build and cultivate a strong network for yourself. You might be thinking, why is this important? Well, it's important because the fact of the matter is that 85% of jobs are gained through networking. We know that. And a lot of that is the hidden job market. It matters who you know. And if they know that you're searching, if they know that you're competent and that you're talented, I know the job that I'm sitting in right now, I wouldn't have known about if it weren't for my network. The University of Redlands, California, was not on my radar, was not a place I knew existed. But because of that network, I knew that this was a job that was coming up before it was even posted. I was getting tapped for consideration before the posting even went live. And no, it wasn't people at the University of Redlands. It was people in the industry that I work within who knew me, knew my work, and knew that I was ready for the next step. They were involved in the search and review and knew that it could be an opportunity that might interest me, and were able to put it on my radar. One of my favorite sayings around networking in general is that you want to dig your well before you're thirsty. You want to be building those connections before you actually need them. You don't want to be reaching out because you're actually in need of a job and next step. You want to be networking before that happens so that you're building solid connections. And connections can help you in a variety of ways, not just with getting jobs or getting that next promotion. They might lend a new perspective or provide a new angle for you to consider, or simply just be a great person to talk about things of interest and value to you. I had a conversation just yesterday with someone in my network who used to be a colleague. Now we're both in different roles at different institutions, and we were able to, in that conversation, catch up, but also share some of the things that we're up to. And I left that conversation with some great ideas of things that I might implement in my role. So it's about sharing knowledge and community. And LinkedIn is a huge community right now, sitting at 750 million members, the largest professional networking site. Once you join LinkedIn, each connection that you make introduces you to an average of 400 new people. You also get access to more than 100 new companies looking for talent or skills, and connection to 500 plus jobs on average. So it's important if you want to use networking, use LinkedIn for networking. It's important really to start with your profile, right? Before you start crafting and building and cultivating a larger network, you want to make sure that your profile is set up to make a really great first impression. Is your profile complete? Do you have a professional photo? Have you customized your profile URL? All of these are important things to really be taking into consideration before you begin launching and cultivating a deeper network. The parts of your profile are pretty extensive, and you can see here several of those pieces. One thing that I'll note up front is that completed profiles are ranked higher in searches. So if you are trying to use your LinkedIn profile to get on the radar of recruiters who are using LinkedIn to source talent, you want to make sure that your profile is as complete as possible. Your headline is something that will auto-populate with whatever your most recent opportunity is, but you can customize that to have unique skill sets that you bring, something unique about you as a person. Who are you and what do you want people to know? And that is the first thing that they will see. And it doesn't have to be your current job title. I often think about the job titles that we have don't truly reflect the work that we do in many, and I would say probably in most cases. How can you showcase what you do, what you're skilled at, who you are in that headline that doesn't just reflect your job title? The summary is another piece that you can customize and really give a solid snapshot of who you are, what you value, what you do, and why someone might want to connect with you. The education and experience sections, LinkedIn will actually give you the ability to simply upload your resume. I would urge you not to do that. And I say that as someone who, when I originally uploaded my profile, I did that because I thought it was easier. And now I'm slowly working through to make mine not read like my resume. But the great thing about LinkedIn is that you can make it more personal than you can a resume. You can add I language, you can add a lot more detail and a lot more narrative around what you've been able to accomplish in a way that really tells the story of who you are that doesn't always come through on a resume. So this is your chance to really showcase that, and you can get really creative with your education and your experience sections in doing that. Obviously, parts of your profile are the connections, and we're going to talk more about that in a second. The photo I brought up, I will say again, having a professional photo is really important, especially if you're connecting with people that you met maybe at an event or out in the world in general. Having a photo can remind them of who you are if they met you in person first. The skills are another important piece to kind of add some key language, and you can edit what those skills are. What are the things that you want someone looking at your profile to know about your skill set and talents? The groups are another opportunity to showcase what you're interested in. It's a way to give insight into what you value. Also a great way to build connections, and we will get to that component of groups in a second. Some of the other things underneath here, the recommendations are really important. Something that if you do not have recommendations, I would urge you to think about how you can get some recommendations on your profile. A profile is not considered complete on LinkedIn until you have 3 LinkedIn recommendations. And there's a lot of people that can write those for you, whether it's a colleague, whether it's someone that you've worked with in the past, a previous boss, someone in your network that can speak to the skills that you bring. And it's a great way to reach out and ask someone to do that for you. Oftentimes, you can also write recommendations for other people and then say like, hey, would you be willing to recommend me based on this work that we've done together? One thing I would say in asking for recommendations is that you want to be specific in what you want them to speak about, right? You don't just want to, yeah, Kelly's great, really loved working with her. That's not helpful in terms of someone looking at my profile to see what I bring and the value that I bring to an organization. But if you can say, hey, we worked on this strategic planning document together, would you be willing to highlight some of the key roles that I played in doing X, Y, Z? It gives them something to write, which makes that ask a little easier on them, and also makes it so that your recommendations are not fluff, but provide really strong value to your qualifications and value. Another thing that is a possibility, if you are a recent grad, or even if you're not, if you've taken recent coursework, if you've gotten a certificate, those are things that you can add to your profile to, again, add value and really try to give a complete picture of who you are as a professional and what you want others to know about you and your work. The second piece and my second tip ties into the first one a lot, but I think it's important to be aware of and cultivate your brand, right? You want to be consistent in how you're presenting yourself and how you're communicating on LinkedIn, and how all of that combines to kind of give a solid picture of who you are, right? You want your profile to be optimized, as well as kind of have it tell a story about your professional path, and where you're headed next. And I think it's important, if you haven't thought about your own brand, a good time to think about it is as you're really developing and honing your LinkedIn profile, of how can you present that brand to the world, and how can you do it in a way that's authentic to you. So paying attention to your language. What do you talk about in your summary? One of my favorite summaries that I've ever seen on LinkedIn is from a previous colleague of mine, and his summary was not a bio, right? If you read mine, I actually dislike mine. Now you're all going to go and look me up on LinkedIn and read my summary, but my summary reads like a bio that you could copy and paste and introduce me before I present. And what I appreciated about this colleague's summary is that it wasn't that. It was a narrative about who he is as a person, and that won't change regardless of what job he gets next, right? So that can work for some people. For some people, the bio might fit you. For me, I don't actually feel like the bio fits me right now, and I'm working on retweaking my summary. I would urge you to think about, what does that summary say about you, and what do you want it to say, and how can it present you in the way that is reflective of the brand that you're putting forth within your organization. If you own your own company, or if you are an employee for another organization, what is that brand that you bring to that organization, and who you are. Also important then to think about the skills that you're highlighting. Also part of that is the organizations that you're following. What groups are you a part of, and how does all of that come together to reflect who you are as a person? My third tip is finding ways that you can add value to your network, right? How can you potentially share information that might be helpful to your audience by writing articles, sharing articles? How can you write recommendations for those in your network? How can you engage your connections with different content that they might find valuable? And part of this is adding value. Another piece of this is making sure that you're being active on LinkedIn. I know a lot of folks who will brush up their LinkedIn profile only when they're searching for their next opportunity, where the true value in LinkedIn is that community. And the more you are active, the more you're going to be able to build onto that community, to potentially open up a door in the future. So being active on LinkedIn, what does that look like? I mentioned writing. You can share your insights and stories by posting something, right? You have the ability to write and publish articles on LinkedIn. And I know some folks that have shared with me, especially recent graduates, like, well, I don't really have anything of value to add. But you do. Everybody has value to add based on your experiences, and you each have value. So are there ways that you could write an article, or maybe even like a how-to guide, your top 10 tips that you learned through the job search process, right? There's a lot of things that each of you can share within your own industry, and it's a great way to establish credibility. And there's no barrier to entry, right? You have value and contributions to make, and this is a great way that you can do that on LinkedIn. I also recommend joining groups, engaging in conversations with people in like-minded industries and organizations. And there's a group for everything. And if there's not, you can start a group and get people to be interested in something that maybe doesn't exist yet on LinkedIn. Though I would love to hear about that, because I think there's groups for everything possible on LinkedIn, and it's a great opportunity to, again, further your network. I know I've joined several groups that are things that interest me that honestly may not align with the work that I'm doing right now, but might be work that I want to do in the future. And I've been able to talk with people, right? One of my goals is to write a book one day, right? Well, I'm involved in some LinkedIn groups with people who are currently publishing books, and that's really cool for me to learn from them in the hopes that one day I can do that as well, right? So joining LinkedIn groups can be a great way to meet new people. And again, from those connections, you never know what can come from that in the future. Another way to be active is to recommend recommend that you can connect other people in your network with others that you meet, right? So when you meet someone, connect with them, and you can offer to them that you'd be willing to recommend other folks in your network to that person. I had someone reach out to me a week or two ago based on something that I published on LinkedIn. I published an article that I had written, and someone that I didn't know that wasn't in my current network saw it because of people in my network had engaged with the content, which got it to come up on their LinkedIn feed. And they read the article, they commented and engaged with it, but then they also sent me a connection request. And in that connection request was some specific content about what resonated with them in the article that I wrote, but also a comment that they'd be happy to, you know, introduce me to people in some of these other areas based on things that I'd written. So you never know, again, when you're kind of writing, you're joining, you're meeting people, what can come from that, and ways that not only can you gain from the network, but I think a piece of this is how can you give back to the network, and that's one way that you can do that. Also posting content, right? Not only can you write and craft your own, you can also post and share engaging content and add your lens to it. So just this morning I was on LinkedIn, like I am often in the morning, and looking at some of the things that some folks in my network have shared. And I was able to see something that a colleague of mine hadn't written but shared. So then I got the article, but I also got that colleague's take on that article. And it was a great way for me to take in some information and see a great thing that he did, right? And then I was able to comment on it. So it's like it engages further and further. There's lots of ways if you don't want to write and craft your own content, maybe you don't feel comfortable with that. Maybe you don't feel comfortable starting your own group. But there are a lot of ways that you can engage on other people's content that can also, again, get you interacting and having conversations and continuing to build and craft your own network. Last tip is really, okay, so I talked a lot about some things that, you know, should be thinking about before you're actually really going out to build a stronger network, which is making sure your profile is set and up to date and current, making sure that it's reflecting who you are. Once you're doing that, logging in on a consistent basis and being interactive with your community. And it's also important to really thoughtfully connect with those you know and those that you want to know in this process. So how do you really build your connections? The first thing I would say, if you're new to LinkedIn, even if you're not new to LinkedIn, because people are joining every day, search the people you may know tab on your profile to connect with people that you might know, whether it's family, it's friends from high school, it's friends from your undergraduate degree, it's friends from a company that you worked at 10 or 20 years ago. Add current colleagues. Make sure that you're building that people you may know tab. And the thing that's nice, because people keep adding, is you'll keep finding people. Every day I'm on there, and every day I'm like, oh, wow, how am I not connected to this person that I used to work with, you know, 5 jobs ago? Let me add them on LinkedIn and let me see what they're up to and have a conversation, right? So adding people that you may know is a consistent thing that you're going to be doing as you're building your network. A piece that's important as you're doing this, and my rule of thumb is whether you know them because it's your uncle, or you know them as an old colleague, or you just met them yesterday at an event on campus or in your organization, you want to tailor that request. I think it's really important to make that request personal. And I'll be honest, when I get connection requests and they're not personal, I don't add them because I don't know why they're connecting with me, and I'm not sure necessarily who they are. Now, granted, if it's my uncle, I'm gonna accept it anyway. I won't dig on my uncle. But for folks that I don't know as well, or I may not remember working with them, it's always a helpful rule of thumb to make that connection request personal. And LinkedIn will populate it to say, like, I'd like to add you to my network on LinkedIn. I recommend maybe keeping that as the last sentence, but adding some more to that to really tailor. It kind of leads into my next point of, don't blanket connect to people. Say that you go to a webinar or you attend an event and you meet someone, and you maybe had a 30-second conversation with them, and maybe for you it was really impactful, but that person maybe was there to recruit and maybe met 50 to 100 people. just sending them a blanket connection request or just blanket connecting to somebody that you see on there who has a cool job without any context, right? I would say refrain from doing that, because chances are, one, they may not accept you. They may not connect, but even if they do, they may wonder, like, who is this person in my LinkedIn connection? So you don't want just like quantity of connections, right? You want your LinkedIn community to be quality connections of people that you know, that you have things in common with, that you both understand why the connection was made. And then interacting is important. So for those people who you do know, right, engage with them further, because that will further your network and your reach. One of the things I shared up in the beginning, right, is that each connection you make introduces you to an average of 400 new people. So if you connect with that person, you then are gaining a little networking line, like the background of this image, to all of their connections, right? And are there people that they're connected with who you might want to know? So really kind of engaging with those people who you do know does further your network and reach if you're intentional about it. And that leads to the last part, is really researching people that you might want to know. So as you look at your network, as you're building it, as you're kind of really fine tuning that profile and that brand, start doing some research of people that you want to know. So is that you look on LinkedIn and look for, job titles for the next step of a career step that you want to take, or you're looking within a certain company because you maybe want to pivot to a different career path. Look up people that you want to know and reach out, right? And there's a lot of people that have different feelings on this. I'm of the mindset that if you don't reach out, you will never know if they would have a conversation with you. I don't say that in blanket connecting to people. However, if you really tailor that message and you're really intentional with why you want to talk with them, of why you want to connect, why you might want to have a further conversation over coffee, over virtual coffee right now in our current situation, reaching out and having making the ask to have a conversation can have the potential to create some powerful connections for you. And that's to say that a lot of people may say no, may never, and not even say no, they're not going to reject you. And if they do, you're not going to know, right? You might never hear from them. But I think you'll be surprised at how often you will hear from someone that says, yes, I'm willing to have a coffee with you because I really appreciate what you said here and I'd love to chat with you. And in our line of work, we call those informational interviews. I think about when I was an associate director in a career center, and I was really thinking, actually, no, this was before I was an assistant director, and I was thinking about applying for an associate director position within my own organization. It was a next step up. It was a promotion where I'd be supervising colleagues, and a few folks in my office had said, Kelly, you'd be great for this. You should apply. And I really wasn't sure if I wanted to. And so I went on LinkedIn and I typed in associate director career center. And the first 20 people who came up, I contacted and said, my name's Kelly. I'm working in the career services world right now, and I'm really unsure if I want to take the next step. It looks like you're really successful as an associate director. Would you be willing to chat with me about your experiences and share some insight with me as someone who's really successful in this field? And of those 20 people, 13 connected with me and said, absolutely, let's have a conversation. Of those 13 that I chatted with, 5 of them I continued speaking to. And 2 of them I still speak with on a near monthly basis. None of us are in the same position. Both of them are actually still a step above me. So no longer are those 2 even directors in career centers. They're now up in higher ed administration, further along, but I've slowly been kind of following them in the career ladder. And in that initial conversation, what came from that was knowledge that, yes, this is something that I want to do. So I learned in those conversations that, yes, I do want to take this step. I also gained insight on how I could best prepare myself for that step. And I feel like from those conversations, I was able to have a leg up in my application, in my my knowledge of how to really stand out in the interview process. And then I gained connections that were doing that work. And as they've advanced, they've still been people that I can go to. And what's great is sometimes people think in doing that, like, oh, I'm wasting these people time. I'm taking advantage of their expertise. Like it can be a very intimidating process, but it's recognizing that you also give back to those people in those interactions, and thinking truthfully, how can you give back? Those 13 people are people who got thank you cards from me in the mail with a Starbucks gift card, because we didn't actually go to coffee because none of them were within the same state that I was in at the time. So I sent them a coffee as a way to say thank you for your time. And that's an important piece. If you are doing this outreach to people that you don't know, how can you thank them? And then for those that you chat with and you're like, wow, I really want to have a further relationship with you. How can you continue that conversation? And for me, I always ask questions of people that could help me learn, but can also allow me to follow back up if I want to. Right. So some of the people that you talk to in this, it's a one and done conversation. It was great. You can thank them, but you really don't want to have further conversations with them, perhaps. Right. For those people that you do, though, how do you follow back up? And I think that's an important piece to think about if you are going to go on this journey of really building some intentional connections with people of interest. How can you make sure that you're asking questions that are allowing you the opportunity to learn and grow, but also follow back up? So I always ask, what are things that you are reading right now in this industry? Like, how are you keeping your knowledge up to date? What are you following? What do you read every morning to stay up to date? And then I read and follow those things. And then I'm able to use those as opportunities to follow back up and have a conversation. Hey, did you see this thing that was published? Would you be willing to jump on a call and chat about it? I'd love to pick your brain. Here's my perspective, right? So you're still adding value by engaging them in conversations around keeping that connection. It's really building relationships. It's relationship building, perhaps with a little bit of intention around your career and your career path. The last piece I'll add is I feel like I share a lot of tips. There's so much more that you can go into with LinkedIn and how to utilize it and how to make the most of it and how to craft your network. I am happy to take questions in terms of following up with this. So what I would say to you is add me on LinkedIn. You can find me, Dr. Kelly Dries, on LinkedIn. Happy to meet and chat with you, and hopeful that this was helpful and that you will follow up with some questions and conversation. I'd love to talk with you more about LinkedIn. Thank you so much.